Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. So today I have kind of an unusual video. I've done reviews on craft books before. I did one on The Happy Writer most recently, but I just started reading a book called The Anatomy of Genres, How Story Forms Explain the Way the World Works by John Truby. Because I am a multi-genre author, I love to learn, and the premise of this book, the idea that story forms explain the way the world works and are informed by, the way that our minds perceive reality and things like that, is very interesting to me. Plus, I write in multiple genres myself, so anything that I can learn to appreciate and use different forms better, I find really interesting. So I started this literally just a couple of days ago. I have not finished it, so I'm not going to call this a complete review, more of an initial set of thoughts, but I have lots of thoughts as I'm going through this. Now, for some background, I taught at the high school level for over a decade. So I've taught creative writing, I've thought a lot about different genres and how to unpack them and how to analyze literature and that kind of thing. So I came into this with a lot of thoughts already just on genre, on how to establish tone and what some of the underlying assumptions are and beats and things like that. So that said, I got into this book, and it's very interesting how John Truby sets it up. So he starts off by saying that there are this finite number of primary genres. He calls, he of course says that there are many subgenres that can be, taken out of these different ones. Right out of the gate, I'm not entirely sure why he sets up some of these genres as different enough from each other to not be subgenres. So he has, for example, crime and detective as two very different styles of story. Now, I haven't gotten to those chapters. I'm interested to see what he has to say. He's already teased some of his thoughts on his detective genre. But why those would be so different, why the Western would be so completely different from the action, I'm just very curious to see how he separates those out. What he doesn't separate out is a love story that ends tragically and one that ends happily, like romance, right? So it's an interesting separation just right out of the gate. Now, his claim is that he is going to go through each of these genres in an order that is very intentional. So let me see if I can find the quotation, because I found it an interesting way of looking at things. Again, some of it I agree with and some of it I don't. I'm going to break that down here in a second. So at the very beginning, it's essentially the prologue. He talks about the world as story, and it's the way that we understand our lives. And through the lens of each of these genres, we can understand underlying realities and questions that we have as humans. So the hierarchy of genres is based on three things. Again, he's going to call this a hierarchy, a very intentional order. Keep that in mind. The hierarchy of genres is based on three things: the primary character flaw that the hero must overcome, the quality of the life philosophy the form expresses. I'm interested to see what he means by quality. Like, is it quality as in something is more important or well-developed, or what does he mean? And the major art/story form that it explores. The first and most primitive genre is horror, the story of escaping death in this life or the next. From there, the sequence moves from least to most enlightened. And I can already feel some of you watching this thinking like, wait, I write horror or action or whatever. Am I not enlightened? What is happening here? So this made my eyebrows go like this, but then he had some interesting things to say that I agreed with more than this hierarchical look at the least to most enlightened genres. So he says we move from action to fantasy, detective, and love. So what I do like about what John Truby does here is that he looks at some underlying life philosophies or questions that fuel the genre in a fundamental sense. This I find incredibly interesting. It does make sense that most effective horror novels or movies are going to ask that question about how do you escape death in this life or the next, by being confronted with it head on, right? It's what you do with that question and with some of those genre expectations that makes your book a successful or not successful use of that form. So the concerns of the different genres are really what made me buy this book in the first place. I saw action is concerned with success. Fantasy is concerned with the art of living. Detective and thriller is concerned with the mind and the truth. Horror is concerned with religion, like that idea that there is something that is higher and greater and inevitable compared to yourself, that is associated with death and or the overcoming of death. So I found this page, it's been one of the most interesting so far because it gives that whole list of genres, the underlying concerns that those genre forms have, and then the claim that there is a hierarchy going from most primitive to most enlightened. I like the idea. I don't like the hierarchy concept. John Truby also claims in his introduction that to rise above the crowd, the writer must transcend the primary genre. So basically, you have to be more than just a handful of cliches in that genre to do well. This I agree with. However, his premise is that you must mix in different elements from a variety of genres to stand out and be successful. There is no other way. You're going to come across as hackneyed, or how does he put it? There's no creativity, no surprise, no way of setting yourself apart as an original author if you do not transcend your genre by mixing in other types. I disagree with this premise. I think that is one way to set yourself apart as an author. I think that another way is by using a unique voice and other elements, not necessarily from different story genres, but different elements of description, of character, of things like that. In fact, last week I talked about some of my thoughts on originality and how some of the fundamental elements of story can be in place, and you can deliver those in a way that is true and original to yourself, and that's enough to have it be an original story, even though some of the bones might have existed for thousands of years. So is that one way to rise above the crowd? Totally. Is it the only way? I would argue, Mr. Truby, that it is not. So he starts off with horror and its connection to life and death, the line between those two. How do we overcome the reality of death through religion or transcending ourselves or what have you? And it was a very interesting discussion of the necessary beats of horror. It seems to me that many of them are necessary and some of them were just observations that some horror stories have that not all of them have. Something that has struck me now twice, once in horror and now I'm in the second genre, action, where he goes through the underlying assumptions, those different things that I mentioned already, the story beats, the philosophy essentially behind different genres as a way of explaining our world. So red horror, I'm in the middle of action, and in each one so far, there has been a factual inaccuracy. So I've mentioned this, I think, but I recently saw Hitchcock's Psycho for the very first time, and because I'm not really a horror girly at heart, but I've started reading a little bit, watching a little bit. I just don't like jump scares and things like that. So I watched Psycho, and I thought it was fantastic. It was extremely well done. Who knew? It's a classic for a reason. But John Truby mentions that Marion, the initial main character, is killed, the very famous shower scene. He says that she is offed early on in the movie. This is incorrect. As I was watching it, I was waiting for that scene, and it actually came almost exactly at the 50% mark, which is a great way of writing or telling stories. There ought to be a really compelling midpoint from which everything completely changes. So the midpoint of Jurassic Park would be the T-Rex getting out. The midpoint of Tangled would be when Flynn and Rapunzel are stuck in that cave and he learns that her hair can glow. I mean, everything starts changing from the 50% mark. It's when Mr. Darcy proposes to Lizzie for the first time. So I noticed specifically that it was at the almost exactly that 50% mark that she, met her demise, but he says it's early on in the story. Okay, so that one could be explained away. But then there was another small factual inaccuracy. I am an Indiana Jones girly as well, specifically Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. Those other two, or three at this point, I've seen them, they're whatever. But those two, I love. I have artwork of Indiana Jones in my home. So big fan, to say the least. And I got to the action section, and he's talking about how the opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is famous for a reason, it is iconic, it's amazing. It's Indiana Jones getting the golden idol from this temple full of booby traps and how he manages to escape, at least with his life. But he says that Indy goes up to that pedestal with the golden idol on it, and it's covered by a glass case. And I'm like, a glass case? Is it just one of those Mandela effect things where I forgot that he took off a glass case? So I actually went back before filming this video just to make sure that my memory was correct, that there was no glass case over this golden idol. And it's true, there is no glass case over this golden idol. So reading this has been an interesting journey of things that make me go, that's an interesting way of looking at that. And things that make me go, I wish I could talk to you, Mr. Truby, because I have thoughts, and some of them are positive and some of them are questioning the authority with which you speak about some of these topics. He will make comments like, there is no greater film than Seven Samurai, period, full stop. And comments like that, I mean, I make similar comments, but I recognize that in some cases they are, they're subjective. You can say, from a storytelling standpoint, that Seven Samurai and cinematography and everything else is an incredible movie, one of the best ever made. Sure, go ahead. But he'll sometimes get a bit hyperbolic and then act like it's something that is, just provably true based on his research, that maybe is not an objective thing, but a subjective thing more so. So I'm curious to see where this goes. But I have been intrigued to discover a bit more about those underlying philosophies, or to have the opportunity to think more about those, and about the types of story beats that different kinds of stories need or benefit from. He uses slightly different language, but he definitely focuses on what I like to focus on in my discussions of plot and structure and genre as well, which is there's an external plot and an internal plot. So character arcs, that internal change mirrors the external change. So he uses different language for that same idea of what's happening externally needs to be mirrored in a fundamental, compelling way with that change that's happening within the main character. So that I'm on board for. I am ready to hear more about what he says in terms of those life philosophies and internal flaws and struggles and weaknesses and lies being confronted and overcome in a variety of different scenarios. But so far, I'm a little surprised that I disagree with as much as I do in this book. So I'll keep you updated. I'll probably do a part 2 on this once I actually finish the rest of the genres. Again, I've only read the introduction where he really lays out his essential argument that he's going to be building throughout the different styles of writing. I have finished all of horror. I'm into action, and I'm going to make my way all the way to love, which he says is the most enlightened, which is not necessarily a common take, but that I am here for. So I'm going to see what he does with it. That's what I have to say for now. I'm feeling kind of argumentative because I've thought very much about the anatomy of genres myself, and everybody wishes they could kind of have that moment of like going toe to toe with somebody in their field and coming out on top. So some of this might just be a smidge of my experience and ego talking, but hey, John has some of that too. I hope to learn some things. I find genre really fascinating. If you are out there as a writer and you want me to talk about any particular genre, my thoughts on like the underlying philosophy or what makes it successful or whatever, I'd be really pleased to dive into that. Just let me know what genres you're interested in the comments. All right. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and I'll see you next time.